Good day, ma'am. I am Myra Calam Salinay, Bscrim 2 Block B. I will going to report about the theories of crime causation. The classical theories of crime causation. Classical theories of crime causation hold primarily that people's decision to commit crime is a matter of choice, because it was assumed that people had free will to choose their behavior. Those who violated the law were motivated by personal needs such as greed, revenge, survival, and hedonism. Utilitarian philosophers Cesare Beccaria and Jeremy Bentham argued that people weigh the benefits and consequences of their future actions before deciding on a course of behavior. Potential violators would stop their actions if the pain associated with a behavior outweigh its anticipated gain. Conversely, law-violating behavior seems attractive if the future rewards seem far greater than the potential punishment. The rational choice theory. The rational choice theory holds that person will engage in criminal behavior after weighing the consequences and benefits of his or her actions. Criminal behavior is a rational choice made by a motivated offender who perceives that the chances of gain outweigh any possible punishment. So this means that every individual can weigh the costs and benefits of committing a crime before deciding to proceed. Thus, all human being is a rational actor and is freely to choose all behavior, both conforming and deviant, based on the rational calculations. So the rational choice theory, which is derived mainly from the expected utility model in economics, has become a hot topic in criminology, sociology, political science, and law. The rational choice theory posits that one takes those actions, criminal or lawful, which maximize payoff and minimize cost. The routine activity theory. This theory was created by Lawrence E. Cohen and Marcus K. Felson, based on their 1979 publication of their seminal article, Social Change and Crime Rate Trends, a Routine Activity Approach. They viewed that crime is a normal function of the routine activities of modern living. That is, offenses can be expected if ever is motivated offender and a suitable target that is not protected by capable guardians. Routine activity theory, also sometimes referred to as lifestyle theory, has been proven to be one of the more useful theories for understanding criminal victimization and offending patterns in the late 20th and early 21st centuries. This theoretical explanation is primarily focused on providing information regarding who is more or less likely to be a crime victim. Routine activity theory is most useful and makes important contributions to social policy and predicting conditions under which victimization risks are enhanced and identifying patterns of social events associated with criminal incidents. So, this means that routine activity theory are the things that people usually do in their lives. Crime happens when there are three conditions come together: the motivated offender, the suitable target, and the absence of capable guardian. So, for example, because of poverty, the boy was motivated to commit a crime, and it is a motivated offender. One day, he saw a girl wearing luxurious jewelries, which is the suitable target, and the girl has no guardian and no one's around with her, which is the absence of capable guardian. Then the boy take the opportunity and grab the bag of the girl and ask her to take off her jewelries, or else he will stab her, and then the boy ran away. If these conditions takes place at the same time, the crime will be committed. Lifestyle theory. The main concept of lifestyle theory is that people may become crime victims because their lifestyle increases their exposure to criminal offenders. A lifestyle theory of victimization was developed by Michael R. Gottfredson Michael Hindilang and James Garofalo in 1978. It argues that because of changing roles, working mother versus housewife, and schedules, a child's school calendar, people led different lifestyles, work and leisure activities. The theory has 8 propositions, and one of it is that the probability of suffering a personal victimization is directly related to the amount of time that a person spends in public places. A high-risk lifestyle may mean getting involved with deviant peer groups, just hanging out, or frequenting bars until late into the night and drinking heavily. Lifestyle theory presents that a person may become a potential suspect because of the presence of potential target. For example, if Franzette, a call center agent who is traveling every night at 11 from her place of duty to her house, may be prone to becoming a victim of robbery or rape because she is always exposed to delinquents who are usually attacking during the nighttime. Therefore, lifestyle theory presented that a person may become a potential suspect because of the presence of potential target. So, this theory has some similar to the routine theory. There is a suitable target and a motivated offender. If the person exposes herself or himself to criminal offenders, this offender will be motivated to victimize the exposed person that results to commit a crime. General deterrence and specific deterrence theory. General deterrence theory is aimed at making potential criminals fear the consequences of crime, showing that crime does not pay. It focuses on potential offenders and that these offenders must receive punishment in severe, swift, and certain ways. It also manifesting societal deterrence, which aim to target would-be offenders. An example of which is imposing long prison sentences or in the lifetime imprisonment for violent or heinous crimes. So this means that to deter crime, there is a punishment to it so that the potential offender will have fear to commit a crime. The punishment must be severe, swift, and certain to hinder the motivated offender to commit a crime. Specific deterrence theory. Specific deterrence theory holds that if offenders are punished so severely, the experience will convince them not to repeat their illegal acts. Its main targets are those offenders who have already been convicted, as it also claims that punishing more criminals will reduce their involvement in criminal activities. So this means that the offenders will be convinced not to repeat their illegal act because the punishment to it is so severely. The punishment is not only the penalty or a sentence being charged to them, but also it keeps them away from their family, or possibly their wife or husband will leave them. So the target of the general deterrence theory are those motivated offenders who attempt to commit a crime, and the target of the specific deterrence theory are those motivated criminals who already convicted and experience severe punishment that convince them not to repeat their illegal acts. Victim precipitation theory. Victim precipitation theory viewed that some people may actually initiate the confrontation that eventually leads to their injury or death. It was first presented by Hans von Hintig in 1941 and applies only to violent victimization. Its basic premise is that by acting in certain provocative ways, some individuals initiate a chain of events that lead to their deaths. A wife who was able to kill her husband because he kept on beating her every time he got drunk is one of example. The husband became a victim in this case since the perpetrator, the wife, just acted on self-defense. So, victim precipitation is the act of the one who initiated the commission of the crime. The motivated offender will have the potential to commit a crime because there is a suitable target. The concept of victim-offender interaction can be classified either active or passive precipitation. Active precipitation occurs when the victims act provocative, provocatively, use threats or fighting words, or even attacks the offenders first. For example, a person shouts and utters profane language at his enemy. However, the latter has a knife and thus he stabs the former to death. So active precipitation is the act of victims who create an opportunity or challenging the offender that results to attack the offenders first. Passive precipitation occurs when the victims exhibits some personal characteristics that unknowingly either threatens or encourages the attacker. For example, B, who has tattoos all around his body, may be a threat to somebody, especially if B is already drunk. Even though he did nothing wrong, the other person get threatened may attack him, leading to his injury or immediate death. So, passive precipitation is where the victims can threaten the attacker because of its some personal characteristics that cause his injury or immediate death. The offender will attack the victim maybe because she or he think that that person will attack him or her because of its personal characteristics or appearance. Incapacitation theory. Incapacitation theory stands to reason that if more criminals are sent to prison or keeping known criminals out of circulation, the crime rate should go down. This theory supported the idea of imprisoning the criminals. So this theory is almost the same with the specific deterrence, but the difference is that the punishment of specific deterrence is so severely so that the criminals will not be motivated to commit a crime or to commit again their illegal acts. While the incapacitation theory, if the criminals are sent to prison, they will not be motivated again to commit their illegal acts. If the people know that the consequences of their illegal acts is imprisonment, they will not be motivated to commit a crime. To disable the criminals to commit a crime, there must be an imprisonment to those criminals. Psychological theories of crime causation. Psychological theorists express that criminal behavior was the product of unconscious forces operating within a person's mind. According to this group of theorists, conflicts that occur at various psychosexual stages of development might impact an individual's ability to operate normally as an adult, and that if aggressive impulse is not controlled or is repressed to an unusual degree, some aggression can leak out of the unconscious and a person can engage in random acts of violence. Charles B. Goring in 1870 to 1919, who in 1913 published a book entitled The English Convict Statistical Study, concluded that there is no such thing as a physical criminal type. Instead, he found out using 3,000 convicts as respondents that defective intelligence rather than physical characteristics was the main factor why a person commits a crime. This is the core reason of Goring in refuting Dr. Cesario Lombroso's theory of born criminal. On the other hand, Gabriel Trade in 1943 to 1904 in his theory of imitation believed that people learn from one another through a process of imitation. Psychodynamic theory and psychosexual stages of human development. Psychodynamic or psychoanalytic psychology was proposed by Viennese psychiatrist Sigmund Freud in 1856 to 1939. Still considered as one of the prominent theories in psychology, This theory holds that the human personality is controlled by unconscious mental processes developed in early childhood. It argues that human personality contains three major components, namely ID, ego, and superego. ID dictates the needs and desires. It operates under pleasure principle. So this ID is our body that the needs is our desire. Superego counteracts the ID by fostering feelings or morality. Morality principle. It is divided into two parts, conscience and ego ideal. So this superego is our is spiritual that will counteract the our personal desires. So next is ego. Evaluates the reality of a position of these two extremes reality principle. If these three components are properly balanced, the individual can lead a normal life. But if one aspect of the personality governs at the expense to others, the individual exhibits abnormal personality traits. For example, upon entering a room, you found out a wallet full of money. If you will take the wallet and will not tell anyone that is you who found it, your conscience, or one of the parts of superego morality principle, is not working because it didn't intervene your ID or pleasure principle and did not tell your ego or reality principle that the wallet is not yours. Psychosexual stages of human development. The most basic human drive present at birth is eros, the instinct to preserve and create life. Psychosexual stages of human development. The most basic human drive present at birth is eros, the instinct to preserve and create life. Eros is expressed sexually. Consequently, very early in their development, human experience sexuality at every stage, expressed by seeking pleasure through various parts of the body. According to Freud, during the first year of life, the oral stage, a child attains pleasure by sucking and biting. During the second and third year of life, the focus of sexual attention is on the elimination of body waste, the anal stage. The phallic stage occurs during the third year when children focus their attention on their genitals. Males begin to have sexual feelings for their mothers, the Oedipus complex, and girls for their fathers, the Electra complex. Latency begins at the age of 6. During this period, feelings of sexuality are repressed until the genital stage begins at puberty. This marks the beginning of adult sexuality. According to Freud, if the child meets conflict in any of the psychosexual stages of human development, he or she can become fixated later on his or her life. This means that as an adult, the fixated person will exhibit behavioral traits that characterize those encountered during infantile sexual development. For example, an infant who does not receive enough oral gratification during his first year of life is likely to become an adult engaged in such oral behavior as smoking, drinking, or drug abuse. This theory explains that behavioral problems manifested by a certain individual can be traced back to his early stage of life. Behavioral theory. Behavioral theory is originally created by John B. Watson and popularized by Burroughs Frederick Skinner in 1904 to 1990, or as B.F. Skinner. While psychologists agree that behavior is controlled by unconscious mental processes determined by parental relationships developed early in childhood as what Freud believed, others like Watson and Skinner do not. Behavioral theory. The behavioral theory is originally created by John B. Watson in 1978 to 1958 and popularized by Burroughs Frederick Skinner in 1904 to 1990, or as B.F. Skinner. While psychologists agree that behavior is controlled by unconscious mental processes determined by parental relationships developed early in childhood as what Freud believed, others like Watson and Skinner do not. The behavioral theory is concerned with the study of observable behavior rather than unconscious processes. It focuses on particular stimulus and how people respond to that stimulus. It also maintains that human actions are developed through learning experiences, and that behavior is learned when it is rewarded and extinguished by negative reactions or punishment. So behavioral theory is doesn't focus on the unconscious mind, but its concern is the based on the experience of a human that is being observed. Social learning theory. Social learning theory is a branch of behavioral theory most relevant to criminology. It was created by Albert S. Bandura in 1973, a Canadian psychologist who argued that people are not actually born with the ability to act violently, but that they learn to be aggressive through their life experiences. The experiences include personality observing others acting aggressively to achieve some goal or watching people being rewarded for violent acts on television or in movies. So Albert S. Bandura believed that the human is not actually born with the ability to act violently, but because of their life experiences, the environment that surrounds them is aggressive, then they learn to be aggressive, like watching people being rewarded for violent acts on television or in the movies. So they became aggressive because their environment is also aggressive, and like watching televisions that the act of aggressive is being rewarded. Bandura claimed that people learn to act aggressively when, as children, they model behavior after the violent acts of adults. So, the violent acts of adults here is the model of the children. So, if they will see that their adults is aggressive, then they will learn to be aggressive also. For example, a boy who sees his father repeatedly striking his mother with impunity is one of most likely to grow up to become a battering parent and husband. So if the child will saw what is happening between his mother and father, that is have a conflict, and his father is striking her mother, so there is a possibility that that child then will grow as a father to be aggressive also, as what he saw to his father. Social learning and violence, Bandura 1973, believed that violence as something learned through a process called behavior modeling. Aggressive acts are usually modeled after three principal sources. Number one is the family members. Bandura reports that children from families where parents show aggressive behaviors inside their homes would likely show similar behaviors when dealing with others. So if the children of the mother and father will saw that his parents is being aggressive, he will also do that to others. Environmental experiences. People who reside in areas where violence is a daily occurrence are more likely to act violently than those who dwell in low-crime areas which norm stresses or shows conventional behavior. Number three is the mass media. Films and television shows, which are accessible to people of all ages and social status, commonly depict violence graphically. Moreover, in mass media, violence is often portrayed as an acceptable behavior, especially for heroes who never have to face legal consequences for their actions. So mass media is very influential to human because, like watching televisions, so in action movies there is a aggressive actions, like superheroes, but there is no violations in that actions because it is only a movie. That's why we human also copying that actions to be aggressive. Cognitive theory. Cognitive theory is a branch of psychology that studies the perception of reality and the mental process required to understand the world we live. It focuses on mental processes, the way people perceive and mentally represents the world around them. Adolescents who use information properly, who are better conditioned to make reasoned judgments, and who can make quick and reasoned decisions when facing emotion level, are the ones can avoid antisocial behavior choices. Cognitive perspective contains several subgroups, such as the moral intellectual development branch, which is concerned on how people morally represent and reason about the world. Jean William Fritz Piaget in 1946 to 1980 is the Swiss psychologist who was the first to make a systematic study of the acquisition of understanding in children based on his cognitive development theory. Moral development theory. Lawrence A. Kohlberg in 1927 to 1987 expanded Piaget's theory of cognitive development and applied the concept of development stages to issues in criminology. His theory of moral development in 1973 was dependent on the thinking of the former Piaget and the American philosopher John Dewey. He suggested that people travel through stages of moral development, and that it is possible that serious offenders have a moral orientation that differs from those law-abiding citizens. He and his associates found out that criminals were found to be lower in their moral judgment development than non-criminals of the same social background. Moral development theory suggests that people who obey the law simply to avoid punishment or who have outlooks mainly characterized by self-interest are more likely to commit crimes than those who view the law as something that benefits all of society and who honor the rights of others. Intergenerational transmission theory. Intergenerational transmission theory refers to the socialization and social learning that helps to explain the ways in which children growing up in a violent family learn violent rules and subsequently may play out the roles of victim or victimizer in their own adult families as adults. Intergenerational transmission theory states that criminal and antisocial parents tend to have delinquent and antisocial children, as shown in the classic longitudinal surveys by John McCord in Boston and Lee Robinsons in St. Louis, USA in 1982. The most extensive research on the concentration of offending in families was carried out in the Cambridge study in delinquent development. According to the study, having a convicted father, mother, brother, or sister predicted a boy's own convictions, and all four relatives were independently important as predictors for conviction. For example, 63% of boys with convicted fathers were themselves convicted, compared with 30% of the remainder. The concept of intergenerational transmission is also used by social scientists who conducted research on family violence, such as Anne Duffy and Julian Mumirov in 2000, who utilized the concept of intergenerational transmission to explain the social learning of violence within families. Alternative theory. Alternative theory beats the famous saying that says opposite charges attract. Alternative theory focuses on assortative mating where female offenders tend to cohabit with or get married to male offenders. In Dunedin study in New Zealand, which is a longitudinal survey of over 1,000 children from age 3, Robert F. Krieger and his colleagues 2010 found that sexual partners tended to be similar in their self-reported antisocial behaviors. Children with two criminal parents are likely to be disproportionately antisocial. There are two main classes of explanations concerning why similar people tend to get married. cohabit or become sexual partners. The first is called social homogamy, where convicted people tend to choose each other as mates because of physical and social proximity. They meet each other in the same schools, neighborhoods, clubs, pubs, and so on. The second process is called phenotypic assortment, where people examine each other's personality and behavior and choose partners who are similar to themselves. So alternative theory is assorted. If the female offenders and the male offenders will cohabit and their children will found as antisocial behaviors because their children have the two criminal parents that is disproportionately antisocial. So social homogamy is where convicted people tend to choose each other as mates because of physical and social proximity. So, the social homogamy, the convicted person will choose their mates because of their sexual and social proximity. So, they have the same physical and social proximity. In phenotypic assortment, the person will examine first or get to know first the behavior of their chosen partners. Differential association reinforcement theory. In Ernest W. Burgess, 1886 to 1966, and Ronald L. Akers combined Bandura's social learning theory and Sutherland's theory of differential association to produce the theory of differential association reinforcement. This theory suggests that 1. The presence of criminal behavior depends on whether or not is rewarded or punished, and 2. The most meaningful rewards and punishment are those given by groups that are important in an individual's life, like the peer group, the family, teachers in school, and others. In other words, people respond more readily to the reactions of the most significant people in their lives. So the people will just the people is their centeredness is the very important person to their lives. So this means that and its centeredness is the very important person into their life. If the criminal behavior elicits a more positive reinforcement or reward than punishment, such behavior will persist. It means that a criminal behavior will continue if it is being positively rewarded than being punished. So the criminal will continue because the reward is more heavy than the punishment. In this case, the role of the parents as the first teachers is very important because they are the ones that would primarily reinforce the positive behavior of their children. So our parents are our first teachers, our primary teachers that will teach us about the good moral or the good conduct. They will the one who reinforce the good moral principles. So our parents is our first teachers, and they are very important to us because they are the primary reinforcement. So our parents is very important to us because they were our first teacher who is primarily reinforce the good behavior to us so that we will follow also that good behavior. If the parents would reward the negative behavior of the children, then the undesirable behavior of that child will continue until he becomes an adult. So if the children has negative behavior and the parents will reward them, their negative behavior will continue because the children will know that even they have a bad behavior, their parents will also reward them and dili nila badlungon ang ilang anak. So for example, if the child gets 0 in his quiz and the mother will still give reward to that children, then the children would think that it is alright not to study and would not only cheat out of laziness. So this child is, it's okay. He think that it's okay to get 0 in his quiz because he know that his mom will still give him a reward and dili siya kasukan. Eysenck's conditioning theory. Hans G. Eysenck, in 1916 to 1997, in his theory of conditioning claims that all human personalities may be seen in three dimensions such as psychotism, introversion, and neuroticism. Those who score high on measures of psychotism are aggressive, egocentric, and impulsive. Those who score high on measures of extroversion are sensation-seeking, dominant, and assertive, while those who score high on measures of neuroticism may be described as having low self-esteem, excessive anxiety, and wide mood swings. Eysenck prepared questionnaires that what he called Eysenck Personality Questionnaire, or the EPQ, and found out that criminals uniformly score higher in any of those mentioned dimensions than non-criminals. Another argument made by Eysenck 1962 is that humans develop a conscience through conditioning, and that criminals become conditioned slowly and appear to care little whether their social actions bring disapproval. He found out that extroverts are much more difficult to condition than introverts. Likewise, he found that conditionability depends on certain psychological factors, the most important of which is cortical arousal, or the activation of the cerebral cortex of the brain, which is responsible for the higher intellectual functioning, information processing, and decision-making. Integrated theory. Integrated theory has been proposed by James Q. Wilson in 1931 to 2012 and Richard Julius Hernston in 1930 to 1994. They explain predatory street crime by showing how human nature develops from the interplay of psychological, biological, and social factors. The main concept of this theory is that the genes and environment are factors for some individuals to form the kind of personality that is likely to commit crimes. So, the concept of this theory, if your genes and your environment is more likely to be a criminal, then your personality will also likely to commit a crimes. They stated that the factors that could push the individuals to commit crimes are intelligent quotient, or the IQ, body build, genetic makeup, impulsive ability to delay gratification, aggressiveness, and even those with mothers who drink and smoke while pregnant. Lastly, they also argued that if reward such as money is greater than expected punishment, small fine, there is an increased likelihood that a crime will be committed. So they argued that if the reward of the crime that they commit is greater than the punishment, so the crime rate will be increased. Maternal deprivation and attachment theory. Maternal deprivation attachment theory has been devised by British psychiatrist Edwin John M. Bowlby in 1907 to 1990, who expressed the notion that a child needs warmth and affection from his or her mother or a mother substitute. The idea came from Bowlby experiments on infant monkeys. The said infant monkeys were given the choice between two wire monkeys. One is made of uncovered cage wire but dispensed milk, while the other is made of cage wire covered with soft fabric but did not give milk. The infant monkeys in the experiment were attached to the warm-clothed monkeys, which provided comfort and security even though it did not provide food. What does the experiment have to do with criminality? So Bowlby emphasized that the most important phenomenon to social development takes place after the birth of any mammal, and that is construction of an emotional bond between infant and his mother. When a child is separated from the mother or is rejected by her, anxious attachment results. Anxious attachment affects the capacity to be affectionate and to develop intimate relationship with others. Social theories of crime causation. In this chapter, sociological theories of crime causation will be discussed. It explains how a certain individuals acquires criminal or undesirable behavior. It describes how the agents of socialization such as family, environment, schools, mass media, and peer groups contribute to or affect the behavior of a specific individual, and it would also somehow manifest as to how person responds or reacts with regard to the conduct displayed by the other persons whom he or she is socializing with. The subfields of the sociological theories are social structure theories, which suggest that social and economic forces operating in the deteriorated lower class areas push many of the residents into criminal behavior patterns. Social structure theory has three major branches such as social disorganization theory, strain theory, and cultural deviance theory. Another subfield of sociological theory is social process theories, which hold that criminality is a function of individual socialization. Social process theories also have three major branches such as social learning theory, social control theory, and the social reaction theory. Social disorganization theory. Social disorganization theory was created by Chicago-based sociologist Clifford R. Shaw in 1895 to 1957 and Henry D. Mackay in 1899 to 1980, who linked crime rates to neighborhood ecological characteristics. Crime rates are elevated in highly transient mixed use, where residential and commercial property exist side by side, and or changing neighborhoods, in which the fabric of social life has become fade. These localities are unable to provide essential services such as education, healthcare, and proper housing, and as a result experience significant levels of unemployment, single-parent families on welfare, and aid to dependent children. Social disorganization theory views crime-ridden neighborhoods as those in which residents are trying to live at the earliest opportunity. Residents during this time are not interested anymore when it comes to community matters. That is why the common sources of control such as the family, business community, and social service agencies become weak and disorganized. Shaw and Mackey's main contention is that the primary causes of criminal behavior were neighborhood disintegration and slum conditions, places which they call transitional neighborhoods or places ridden in poverty. Such as places also suffer high rates of population turnover and are incapable of inducing residents to remain, failing to defend their neighborhoods against criminal groups. Concentric zone theory. So this theory was pioneered by Chicago school sociologist Ernest W. Burgess in 1886 to 1966 and Robert E. Park in 1864 to 1944. However, it was Clifford R. Shaw and Henry D. Mackay in 1930 who noted that distinct ecological area had developed in the city of Chicago comprising a series of 5 concentric circles or zones, and that there were stable and significant differences in interzone crime rates. The areas with the heaviest concentration of crime appeared to be the transitional inner city zones, where large numbers of foreign-born citizens had settled. The zones farthest from the city center had lower crime rates. Shaw and Mackey's main assumption is that even though crime rates change, they found that the highest rates were always in the central city and transitional areas. Anomy theory. David Emile Durkheim in 1858 to 1917, a French sociologist, introduced the term anomy, which derived from the Greek anomos, which means without norms. According to Durkheim, an anomic society is one in which rules of behavior norms have broken down or become inoperative during periods of rapid social change or social crisis such as war or famine. Anomy most likely occurs in societies that are moving forward from mechanical solidarity to organic solidarity. Mechanical solidarity is defined as characteristic from pre-industrial society, which is held together by traditions, shared values, and unquestioned beliefs. On the other hand, organic solidarity refers to the post-industrial system of society in which the place is highly developed and dependent upon the division of labor, and people are connected by their interdependent needs for each other's services and production. According to this theory, because of the sudden shift in traditions and values, social turmoil happens. Hence, the established norms began to erode and loose demands become unlimited. With this, obeying legal codes or laws may be strained, and alternative behavior choices, such as crimes, may be inevitable. However, with all this saying, Durkheim maintains that crimes are not only normal for society but are necessary. Without crime, there could be no evolution in law. For example, a decade ago, when the online spread of personal sex videos became rampant, victims, usually women, found it difficult to file charges against the ones who uploaded the videos, as there were no laws covering this area. Hence, the House of Congress created Republic Act 9995, also known as the Anti-Puto and Video Voyeurism Act of 2009. So Durkheim maintains that the crime is a normal in this society because without crime, there is no evolution of law. So if that certain criminal action it has no law at all, so there is no justification of that violent action. Strain theory. American sociologist Robert K. Merton in 1910 to 2003 applied Durkheim's ideas of anomie to criminology. He holds that crime is a function of the conflict between the goals people have and the means they can use to legally obtain that goals. Consequently, those who failed to attain their goals because of the inadequate means would feel anger, frustration, and resentment, which are referred to as strain, and that those people who are in strain or pressure may develop criminal or delinquent solutions to the problem of attaining goals. So if the person has a goal and doesn't attain his or her goals because of inadequate like materials or the financial, he or she will be criminal because the result of his anger, frustration, and resentment. In short, strain theory talks about goal means blockage. For example, Mr. X has the intention to buy a car and that is his goal. But he has not enough money for down payment which may resort to carnapping in his means in order to attain his dream. So Mr. X has a dream of having a car, so but he don't have a financial he don't a enough money to buy that car, so that results him to be a criminal for the reason of carnapping. Relative deprivation theory. This theory was proposed by Judith R. Blau and Peter M. Blau in 1918 to 2002, which clearly emphasizes that a sharp division between the rich and the poor creates an atmosphere of envy and mistrust. Criminal motivation is fueled both by perceived humiliation and the perceived right to humiliate a victim in return. Accordingly, lower-class people might feel both deprived and embittered when they compare their life circumstances to those of the more affluent. The constant frustration suffered by the deprived individuals because of their economic status may lead to aggression and hostility and may result to violence and crime. For example, Dia and Jia are living in proximate distance. Dia is wealthy while Jia is poor. Every morning, Jia smells that Dia's food menu varies every day while in their home. Almost every day, she finds it difficult to prepare even if dried fish only. In the long run, poor Jia may feel envious and better toward the wealthy position of neighbor. Time will come that because of extreme frustration experienced by Jia, she may either be robbed the house of Jia. So the concept of relative deprivation is that general strain theory. Sociologist Robert Agnew in 1992 reformulated the strain theory of Robert Merton and suggests that criminality is a direct result of negative affective states, the anger, frustration, depression, disappointment, and other adverse emotions that derive from strain. Agnew tries to explain why individuals who feel stress and strain are more likely to commit crimes and offers more explanation to criminal activity among all elements of society rather than restructuring his views to lower class crime. He finds that negative affective states are produced by a variety of sources of strains, such as strain caused by the failure to achieve positively valued goals. This type of strain occurs when a youth aspires to wealth and gain, but lacking financial and educational resources, would assume that such goals are impossible to achieve. Another example is, Mar wants to study in college but because his parents cannot afford to send him in school, may end up as a construction worker. Number two is a strain caused by disjunction of expectations and achievements. This aspect happens when people compare themselves to peers who seem to be doing a lot better financially or socially. So, example, San is a graduate of criminology who took a top in the board examination, but because of height requirements, she may wait for the approval of her height waiver, but Sam knew that her classmate who took the board exam twice already and had a high-ranking father was successful in the recruitment using other eligibility. Sam, using Agnew's general strain theory, may feel stressed and frustrated. Removal of positively valued stimuli. The loss of positive stimuli may lead to delinquency as the adolescent tries to prevent the loss, retrieve that has been lost, obtain substitutes, or seek revenge against those responsible for the loss. So example is Jay had a brother and somebody killed his brother. In return, out of anger because that person killed his ever-loved brother, Jay might kill also the person who killed his brother. Presentation of negative stimuli. Strain may also be caused by the presence of negative stimuli. Example, during the first day of board examination, the proctor did not allow you to take the said exam because you arrived 1 hour already. In this case, you as the examinee may feel frustrated, or worst, you may seek revenge against the proctor. Cultural deviance theory. This theory combines the effects of social disorganization and strain to explain how people living in deteriorated neighbors react to social isolation and economic deprivation. Because of the draining, frustrating, and dispiriting experiences, members of the lower class create an independent subculture with its own set of rules and values. This lower class subculture stresses excitement, toughness, risk-taking, fearlessness, and immediate gratification. Subcultural norms such as being tough followed by the lower class may tend to clash with conventional values, the norms set by the society. Example, slum dwellers or informal settlers are forced to violate the law because they obey the rules of the deviant culture with which they are in close and immediate contact. In short, those who are economically deprived and living in disorganized areas in order to gain success may resort to crime and delinquency. In delinquent subculture theory, Albert K. Cohen in 1918 to 2014 first articulated the theory in his classic book, Delinquent Boys. Cohen's position was that delinquent behavior of lower-class youth is actually a protest against the norms and values of the middle-class U.S. culture. Because the social conditions make them incapable of achieving success legitimately, lower-class youths experience a form of culture conflict that Cohen labels status frustration. Status frustration refers to the state where youths are incapable of achieving their legitimate goals in life because of the social conditions that they are into, such as having poor parents and living in slum areas. With this, Cohen was able to believe that because of status frustration, lower-class boys who suffer rejection by middle-class or rich people may tend to form deviant subcultures, and Cohen called it the corner boy, the college boy, or the delinquent boy. The corner boy is the most common response to middle-class rejection. He is not a chronic delinquent but may be a truant who engage in petty or status offenses such as sex before marriage and recreational drug abuse. The college boy embraces the cultural and social values of the middle class. He actively strives to be successful by those standards. The delinquent boy. The delinquent boy adopts set of norms and principles in direct opposition to middle-class values. He strives for independence and that nobody can control his behavior, may join gang unwilling to take risk and violate the law. Differential opportunity theory. This theory is the output of the classical work of Richard A. Cloward in 1926 to 2001 and Lloyd E. Owens in 1918 to 2008. Delinquency and opportunity. This theory is a combination of strain and disorganization principles into a portrayal of a gang-sustaining criminal subculture. The main concept of this theory states that people in all strata of society share the same success goals, but those in the lower class have limited means of achieving them. People who perceive themselves as failures with conventional society will seek alternative or innovative ways to gain success, such as joining drug syndicate and any other forms of illegal activities. Because of the differential of opportunity, kids are also likely to join one of the three types of gang. Number one is criminal gangs. It exists in stable lower-class areas in which close connections among the adolescents, young adult, and adult offenders create an environment for successful criminal enterprise, such as joining gang. Conflict gang thrive in highly disorganized areas marked by temporary residence and physical deterioration. Members of the conflict gang are tough adolescents who fight with weapons to win respect from rivals and engage in destructive assaults on people and property. They are willing to fight to protect their own and their gang's integrity and honor. Number three is the retreatist gang. Retreatists are double failures because they are unable to gain success through legitimate means and unwilling to do so through illegal ones. They have tried crime or violence but are either too weak or scared to be accepted in criminal or violent gangs. Olin and Cloward agreed with Cohen and found out that independent delinquent subcultures exist within society. Youth gangs are an important part of the delinquent subculture. Speaking of subculture, this would refer to groups that are being formed with the values and norms that could clash or in conflict with the dominant culture. Although Cloward and Olin believe that not all illegal acts are committed by gang youth, they are the source of the most serious, sustained, and costly criminal behaviors. The neutralization theory, 1957, is identified with the writings of David C. Matza in 1930 to 2018, and his associate Gresham M. Sykes in 1922 to 2010. They viewed the process of becoming a criminal as a learning experience in which potential delinquents and criminals master techniques that enable them to counterbalance or neutralize conventional values and drift back and forth between illegitimate and conventional behavior. One reason it becomes possible is because of the subterranean value structure of American society. Social reaction labeling theory. This was created by Howard S. Becker in 1963, who explains that society creates deviance through a system of social control agencies that designate the label certain individuals as delinquent, thereby stigmatizing a person and encouraging them to accept this negative personal identity. For example, people labeled insane are also assumed to be dangerous, dishonest, unstable, violent, strange, and otherwise unsound. In contrast, negative labels including troublemaker, mentally ill, and stupid help stigmatize the recipients of these labels and reduce their self-image. In famous statement, Becker sums up the importance of the audience's reaction. Social groups create deviance by making rules whose infraction constitute deviance and by applying those rules to particular people and labeling them as outsiders. Deviance is not a quality of the act of a person commits, but rather a consequence of the application by other of rules and sanctions to an offender. The deviant is one to whom the label at some points and places in history and illegal at others. So the consequences of labeling. Bigger concerns with two effects of labeling, the creation of stigma and the effect of self-image. Stigmatization. Labels are believed to produce stigma. People who have been negatively labeled because of their participation or alleged participation in deviant or outlawed behaviors may be socially outcasted, who may be prevented from enjoying a higher education, well-paying jobs, and other social benefits. Self-labeling. It refers to the process by which a person who has been negatively labeled accepts the label as a personal rule or identity. For example, if the mother keeps on telling her child that her child is dull, then in school the child would also assume that he is dull. So the self-label of that child is being dull. Self-fulfilling prophecy. Deviant behavior patterns that are in response to an earlier labeling experience. A person acts out these social rules even if they falsely bestowed. For example, if the wife keeps on saying that her husband is cheating on her even though it is not true, then there is a big possibility that the husband would fulfill the statements made by her wife. Dramatization of evil. Frank Tannenbaum, in 1938, suggests that social typing, which he called dramatization of evil, transformed the offender's identity from a doer of evil to an evil person. For example, a person who is being labeled a hired murderer may commit a crime because he is being hired, and he may become a real evil murderer already. Primary and secondary deviance. So this deviance was created by Edwin M. Lemert in 1912 to 1996. According to him, primary deviance involves norm violations or crimes that have very little influence on the actor and can be quickly forgotten. For example, a college student takes a book at the campus bookstore. He successfully steals a textbook, uses it to get an A in a course, goes on to graduate, is admitted to law school, and later becomes a famous judge. Because his shoplifting got unnoticed, it is relatively an important event that has little bearing on his future life. In contrast, secondary deviance occurs when a deviant event comes to the attention of significant others or social controls agents who apply a negative label. The newly labeled offender then reorganizes his or her behavior and personality around the consequences of the deviant act. For example, the shoplifting student is caught by a security guard and expelled from college. With his law school dreams dashed and his future cloudy, his options are limited. People who know him will say he lacks character, and he begins to share their opinion. He eventually becomes a drug dealer and winds up in prison. Economic theories of crime causation. The roots of crime are diverse, and a discipline like economics, predicated on rational behavior, may be at something of a disadvantage in explaining a phenomenon largely viewed as irrational. The foray by economists into this area is relatively recent, dating back to Gary Baker's path-breaking contribution in 1963. As part of a larger model designed to explore optimal criminal justice policy, he developed the supply of offense function, which indicates the factors affecting the number of crimes an rational individual commits. Since then, there has been much progress in both expanding on this important relationship and utilizing it for more theoretically grounded analysis of criminal behavior. Economic model of criminal behavior, basic theory. The Economic Model of Crime in 1968 by Gary S. Baker in 1930 to 2014 is a standard model of decision-making where individuals choose between criminal activity and legal activity on the basis of the expected utility from those acts. It is assumed that participation in criminal activity is a result of an optimizing individual responding to incentives. Among the factors that influence an individual's decision to engage in criminal activities are the expected gains from crime relative to earnings from legal work, the chance of being caught and convicted, the extent of punishment, and opportunities in legal activities. Specifying an equation to capture the incentives in criminal decision is a natural first step in most analysis of the crime as work models. The most important of these gives the relative rewards of legal and illegal activity. For example, the economic model sees the criminal as committing a crime if the expected gain from criminal activity exceeds the gain from legal activity, generally worth. Karl Marx theory. Karl Heinrich Marx, in 1818 to 1883, in his famous Communist Manifesto in 1848, viewed crime as the product of law enforcement policies akin to a labeling process theory. He also saw a connection between criminality and the inequities found in the capitalist system. He states that its development had turned workers into a dehumanized mass who live an existence that was at the mercy of their capitalist employers. He wrote of the injustice of young children being sent to work in mine and factories from dawn to dusk. He railed against the people who were being beaten down by a system that demanded obedience and cooperation and offered little in return. He concluded that the character of every civilization is determined by its mode of production, the way its people develop and produce material goods, which is the materialism. Marx identified that there are two components in the mode of production: productive forces, which include such things as technology, energy sources, and material resources, and the productive relations, which are the relationship that exists among the people producing goods and services. The most important relationship in industrial culture is between the owners of the means of production, capitalist bourgeoisie, and the people who do the actual labor, proletariat. According to Marx, capitalist society is subject to the development of a rigid class culture with the capitalist bourgeoisie at the top, followed by the working proletariat, and at the bottom, the French members who produce nothing and live parasitically off the work of others, dependent, which is the lumpen proletariat. In Marx's theory, it claimed that it is not necessary to have a particular amount of wealth or prestige to be a member of the capitalist. It is more important to have the power to exploit others economically, legally, and socially. Friedrich Engels and Wilhelm Wunder's theory. Friedrich Engels, in 1820 to 1895, in his work *The Condition of the Working Class in England*, in 1844, portrayed crime as a function of social demoralization, a collapse of people humanity reflecting a decline in society. Workers are demoralized by the capitalist society, are caught up in the process that leads to crime and violence. Working people committed crime because their choice was a slow death of starvation or a speedy one at the hands of the law. The brutality of the capitalism system, he believed, turns workers into animal-like creatures out of will of their own. The contribution of William A. Bunger is that the same with William A. Bunger, 1876 to 1940, is famous for his Marxist socialist concept of crime causation, which were published in 1916. Bunger believed that crime is of social and not biological origin, but exception of few special cases. Crime lies within the boundaries of normal human behavior. According to Bunger, no act is naturally immoral or criminal. He viewed crimes as antisocial acts that reflect current morality. Bunger believed that society is divided in have and have-not groups, not on the basis of people's innate ability, but because of the system production that is in force. In every society that is divided into ruling class and an inferior class, penal law serves the will of the ruling class. Even though criminal laws may appear to protect members of both classes, hardly any act is punished that does not injure the interests of the dominant ruling class. In capitalist system makes both the proletariat and bourgeoisie crime-prone, but only the proletariat likely to become officially recognized criminals, because the legal system discriminates against the poor by defending the actions of the wealthy, and second of all, it is the proletariat who are deprived of the materials that are monopolized by the bourgeoisie. In short, crimes are function of poverty. Biosocial theories of crime causation. This chapter talks about how the changes of modification of the bio, psycho, and the social component of the person affect his or her behavior. The bio aspect discusses on the things about brain changes, genes, and the functions of major body organs, or etc. So the bio, since the bio is the life, so it discusses other things about brain changes, genes, and the functions of major body organisms. So the psycho component speaks of the emotions, thoughts, and drive of a person, why he or she result a crime to a crime. So the psycho is in what's in our mind. Social component examines how the person socializes or interacts with another person. So social, it involves interaction of others in our environment. The biosocial model of crime causation. The biosocial theory of crime causation is an integration of combination of both the psycho and the social. The bio component of this theory examines aspects of biology that influence health. This might include things like brain changes, genetics, or functioning of major body organs such as the liver, the kidneys, or even the motor systems. For example, let's say John met an incident that leaves him with reduced movement in his left arm. This biological change might influence how he feels about himself, which could lead to depression or anxiety in certain situations. The psycho component of the theory examines psychological components, things like thoughts, emotions, or behaviors. John might go through many different psychological changes. He might experience decreased self-esteem, fear, or judgment, or feel inadequate in his life or job. These changes in thoughts might lead to changes in behaviors, like avoiding certain situations, staying at home, or quitting his job. As he engages in these behaviors, his injury might worsen, or he could suffer further depression and anxiety. The social component of the biosocial model examines social factors that might influence the health of an individual. Things like our interactions with others, our culture, or our economic status. A possible social factor for John could be his role in his household. Perhaps John is a new father. An injured arm might reduce his ability to care for his new baby. Being unable to fulfill this social role might trigger problems with his wife or other family members. It might be causing John stress that could lead to further biological or psychological problems. An important connection to make here is that the elements of biosocial model are all connected. Biology can affect psychology, which can affect social well-being, which can further affect biology, and so on. John's biological state changed, which affected his psychological state and social interactions, which all went to affect each other again. Moral insanity and criminal responsibility. Isaac Ray in 1807 to 1881, credited as America's first forensic psychiatrist, was interested throughout his life in the application of psychiatric principles to the law. The best-known author of Medical Jurisprudence of Insanity, a treatise on criminal responsibility that was widely quoted and influential, where he defended the concept of moral insanity. A disorder first described in 1806 by the French humanitarian and psychiatrist Philippe Pinel in 1745 to 1826. Moral insanity was a term used to describe persons who were normal in all respects except that something was wrong with the part of the brain that regulates affective responses. Ray questioned whether people could be held legally responsible for their acts if they had such impairment because such people committed their crimes without intent to do so. Henry Maudsley, in 1835 to 1918, a brilliant English medical professor, shared Ray's concern about criminal responsibility. According to Maudsley, some people may be considered either insane or criminal according to the standpoint from which they are looked at. He believed that for many persons, crime is an outlet in which their unsound tendencies are discharged. They would go mad if they were not criminals, and they do not go mad because they are criminals. The convulsive energy of the homicidal impulse is sometimes preceded by a strange morbid sensation, beginning in some part of the body and mounting to the brain, very like that which, when preceding an attack of epilepsy, is known in medicine as the aura epileptica. He observed too that the epileptic convulsions may cease to occur in one who has been subject to them, and that in their place attacks of moral derangement with more or less maniacal excitement may appear. Some habitual offenders he noted to be epileptic or from families in which epilepsy, insanity, or other neuroses existed, perhaps influenced by Lombrosian theory or by Groman, who long before Lombroso was born, had described criminals with defective development, prominent ears, projecting cheekbones, large lower jaws, deeply placed eyes, or swiftly, animal-like gaze, modestly too, tended to link epilepsy with physical stigma of degeneration and thus with crime. Premenstrual syndrome. Premenstrual syndrome refers to one set of the menstrual cycle that triggers excessive amounts of the female sex hormones, which affect antisocial aggressive behavior. The link between premenstrual syndrome and delinquency was first popularized more than 25 years ago by Katarina Dorothea K. Dalton in 1916 to 2004, whose studies of English women, 156 newly adult female prisoners, indicated that these females are more likely to commit suicide and be aggressive and otherwise antisocial just before or during menstruation. So, premenstrual syndrome refers to the menstrual cycle for girls who became aggressive because of their condition. Though in the Philippines, by virtue of Article 253 of the Revised Penal Code, committing suicide is not a crime, but the moment other person will help the woman who is suffering from premenstrual syndrome in the commission of suicide, then that person who assisted is liable of giving assistance to commit suicide. Diana H. Fishben, in 1992, in her study, Selected Studies on the Biology of Antisocial Behavior, concludes that there is fact and association between elevated levels of female aggression and menstruation. She further argues that 1. A significant number of incarcerated females committed their crimes during the premenstrual phase, and at least a small percentage of women appear vulnerable to cyclical hormonal changes, which makes them prone to anxiety and hostility. Battered child syndrome. The term battered child syndrome was coined by Dr. C. Henry Kempe in 1922 to 1984, and his colleagues in Landmark article, The Battered Child Syndrome, published in 1962. The syndrome does not establish the culpability of any particular person. Rather, it simply indicates that a child found with serious repeated injuries has not suffered those injuries by accidental means. Evidence of battered child syndrome is used to make logical inference that only someone who is regularly caring for the child would have occasion to inflict these types of injuries, as an isolated act by a stranger would not result in a pattern of successive injuries over an extended period of time. Thus, evidence of battered child syndrome tends to narrow the group of possible child abusers in a criminal proceeding. Battered child syndrome, a medical diagnosis based on evidence indicating that the child has been subjected to a pattern of serious and unexplained abuse. While battered child syndrome is purely a medical diagnosis, evidence of past injuries is actually evidence of the defendant's prior bad acts, that consideration of which may lead to jury to improperly infer that the defendant has a propensity or a character trait for committing wrongful acts. The victim, if alive, is often too young or lacks the psychological capacity and or the courage to testify. Of those children who take the stand, some, due to their age, are ineffective witnesses. Further, the prosecution can rarely find an eyewitness to testify, and the accused is often able to fabricate plausible explanation for the child's injuries. The resulting evidentiary void is compounded by the fact that many jurors are unable to accept the idea that a parent or guardian would intentionally hurt a child. Today, physicians may be allowed to testify as to whether the injured child shows signs of battered child syndrome. The physician's role in the case of battered child syndrome is to establish whether the child received of intentional injuries coming from the abusive guardian or parents of the child. Battered woman syndrome. The battered woman syndrome is a psychological term used to describe a woman who are stuck within or have recently left a violent relationship characterized by the cycle of violence. Battered woman syndrome is modeled after the post-traumatic stress syndrome suffered by Vietnam veterans and later applied to people victimized by rape. Lenore Walker in 1984 refers to the battered woman syndrome as a sort of learned helplessness. The cycle of violence emphasizes physical violence, but physical abuse rarely occurs without psychological abuse. Psychological abuse takes the form of verbal put-downs as well as social economic isolation. This psychological abuse degrades and humiliates the woman, thereby facilitating the destruction of her self-esteem, and by implication her moral personhood. She learns to be helpless as a survival mechanism so as to delay incurring the wrath of the battered decision maker or controller. Under the battered woman syndrome, as articulated by Lauren E. Walker, helps to clarify domestic violence and says that abuse tends to occur according to a particular pattern. There are three basic stages to this pattern. The first stage is characterized by tension between the pair. During this tension, building stage, relatively minor incidents increase the tension in the relationship and culminate in the eruption of violence. The next stage in the cycle of violence is the violent incident. The violence may be short-lived or last for a few days. Often it is at this stage that police are notified or legal proceedings begun. The third stage is referred to as the honeymoon or loving contrition stage. During this time, the abuser is often very loving and remorseful. Promises are made by the batterer that he will not violently abuse the woman again. This stage reinforces the woman's hope that the relationship will get better or is at least salvageable. Since there is a sincere belief that the violence in the relationship has ended, civil and criminal legal proceedings may be dropped or otherwise aborted. The cycle repeats itself and violence becomes more intense. The tension building stage lengthens and the honeymoon stage decreases or disappears entirely. Walker theorizes that it is at the point when the loving contrition disappears that the woman is best able to leave the abusive relationship. The external reinforcement to maintain the relationship has ceased to exist. The woman in this case, who is the victim of battery or beating from the husband or partner, may eventually kill the husband, and if the psychiatrist during trial can establish that the woman is suffering from the said syndrome, then she may be exempted from criminal liability. Postpartum stress syndrome and postpartum psychosis. In the book 2010, Delivery from Darkness, A Jewish Guide to the Prevention and Treatment of Postpartum Depression by Michael Finkelstein, postpartum stress syndrome is an emotional reaction which falls between baby blues and postpartum depression, also known as adjustment disorder. 20% of those women who have baby blues go on to experience postpartum stress syndrome. Postpartum stress syndrome lasts longer than 3 weeks. Unlike baby blues, in which feelings of sadness are interspersed with periods of happiness, postpartum stress syndrome is characterized by a sadness which seeps into a woman's pores and permeates her life. Postpartum stress syndrome causes feelings of anxiety and self-doubt. The woman wants to become a perfect mother and wife, but at the same time, she feels exhausted and overwhelmed. Women experiencing postpartum stress syndrome usually function fairly well and get through their day, though they feel awful inside. Although some women go on to develop clinical depression, most women find relief through the loving support of family and friends as they gradually adjust to their new baby routine. In most instances, reducing day-to-day hassles and lightening responsibilities enable the mother to nurture herself and rediscover her old self. Postpartum depression can come on without warning. A woman does not have to suffer from baby blues or postpartum stress syndrome first. In fact, woman can go through a normal childbirth and recover completely when suddenly PDD strikes like a bolt of lightning. What does depression mean? Being depressed is an overused phrase, describing a passing period of sad or bad feelings. Conversely, clinical depression is defined as prolonged, intense, sad, empty feelings lasting 2 weeks or more. To be diagnosed with any major depressive disorder, not just PPD, an individual must experience depressed mode or anhedonia, the ability to experience pleasure, for 2 weeks in addition to 5 or more of the following symptoms: excessive weight loss or gain, insomnia or excessive sleep, fatigue, feelings of worthlessness, difficulty concentrating, suicidal thoughts. Postpartum psychosis. PPP is caused by multiple factors, is uncommon, with only in 1,000 women developing PPP within a few days after childbirth. It can dramatically affect everyone involved. Some new mothers suffering psychosis that may have to be hospitalized for a short term or even rarer. An unfortunate few who do not receive the right treatment in time may harm themselves or their child. Signs: hearing voices or sounds no one else hears. Thoughts of hurting oneself or baby, no sleep in 48 hours, cannot care for baby or self, rapid weight loss without trying. Should not control her thoughts as if someone else were controlling her. Political or social conflict theories of crime causation. The most thought theories about the political or social conflict theories of crime causation is a theory provided by Karl Marx, the social conflict theory, which finds that society is in constant state of internal conflict, as different groups strive to impose their will on others. Those with money and power succeed in shaping the law to meet their needs and maintain their interests. Those adolescents whose behavior cannot conform to the needs of the power elite are defined as delinquents and criminals. In short, law serves as the tool of the upper class to control the lower class. Though not all crimes are committed by the lower class, but most of the times they are the subject of arrest. Marxist criminology. So the Marxist criminology views crime as a function of the capitalist mode of the production. Within this system, economic competitiveness is the essence of social life and controls the form and function of social institutions. Every element of society, government, law, education, religion, family is organized around the capitalist mode of production comprising of the owners of the production, bourgeoisie, the worker, proletariat, and the non-productive people, lumpen proletariat. The rich, which is the bourgeoisie, use the fear of crime as a tool to maintain their control over society. The poor are controlled through incarceration. The middle class are diverted from caring about the crimes of the powerful because they fear the crimes of the powerless. According to Marx and Engels, criminals came from a third class in society. The lumpen proletariat would play no decisive role in the expected revolution. Conflict theory. The conflict theory views crime as the outcome of class struggle. The classes that are struggling here are the upper, middle, and lower class have not. Conflict works to promote crime by creating a social atmosphere in which the law is a mechanism for controlling dissatisfied, have not members of the society, while the wealthy maintain their position of power. It also viewed that crime is defined by those in power. Power refers to the ability of persons and groups to determine and control the behavior of others and to shape public opinion to meet their personal interests. It was first applied to criminology by three distinct scholars: William A. Bongier in 1876 to 1940, Ralph G. Dahrendorf in 1929 to 2009, and George B. Wold in 1896 to 1967. According to William A. Bongier in 1916, everyone may desire wealth, but it is only the most privileged people, with the most capital, who can enjoy luxuries and advantages, and that people care only for their own lives and pleasures and ignore the plight of the disadvantaged. Ralph Dahrendorf argues that modern society is organized into what he called imperatively coordinated associations. These associations comprise of two groups: those who possess authority and use it for social domination, and those who lack authority and are dominated. And that society is a plurality of competing interest groups. George Wold was the one who adopted the conflict theory in criminology. He argued that crime can also be explained by social conflict. Laws are created by politically oriented groups who seek the government's assistance to help them defend their rights and protect their interests. He found out that criminal acts are a consequence of direct contact between forces struggling to control society. The direct contacts that Wold is referring to are from passing the law, to prosecuting the case, to developing relationships between inmate and guard, parole agent, and parolee is marked by conflict. Social reality of crime. Sociologist Richard Queeny in 1970 embraced a conflict model of crime, who integrated his beliefs about power, society, and criminality into a theory he referred to as the social reality of crime. According to him, criminal definitions or the law represents the interest of those who hold power in society, where there are conflict between social groups. For example, the wealthy and the poor, those who hold power, will be ones who create the laws that benefit themselves. For example, in the Philippines, the law against robbery and theft are intended for the poor only because it protects the property of those in financial power or those who are wealthy. Left realism. This theory is the most connected to the writings of British scholars John Lea and Jack Young in 1942 to 2013 in their 1984 work, What is to be done about law and order? By taking a more realistic approach, saying that street criminals prey on the poor, thus making the poor doubly abused. First by the capitalist system and then by the members of their own class. Their equation is very simple. Relative deprivation equals discontent. Discontent plus lack of political solution equals crime. Young Leia argued that crime victims in all classes need a deserved protection. So clearly, crime happens when a person is being deprived economically, plus the governing body in the community, like barangay chairman, do not know how to render solutions to problems, like rampant stealing in his barangay. If the thief succeeds in his first stealing, then there is a big possibility he'll keep repeating his criminal conduct. Postmodern theory. Postmodern theory. This theory focuses on the critical analysis of communication and language in legal codes. It believes that language is value-laden and can promote the same sort of inequities that are present in the rest of the social structure. It asserts that there are different languages and ways of knowing. Those in power are able to use their own language to define crime and law, while excluding or dismissing those who are in the opposition to the prisoners or the poor. The dominant language of society is the language of the rich and powerful. Constitutive theory. Greg Barak and Stuart Henrys in 1996, constitutive theory defined crime as the application of harm to others. People who are defined as committing criminal acts are at the same time being made unequal or disrespected. They are rendered powerless to maintain or express their humanity. In a sense, then, the act of making people criminals is a crime. According to Barak and Henry, there are two aspects of crime: the crime repression and the crime of reduction. The crime repression occurs when members of a group are prevented from achieving their fullest potential because of racism, sexism, or some other status bias. For example, two girls are applying for sales lady in the department store. One is with pleasing personality, pretty face, tall and white complexion. The other one is short, tan complexion but intelligent. For sure, the one has been accepted was the girl with pleasing personality. The other girl was not accepted, despite the fact that the said girl is intelligent. Crime of reduction occurs when the offended party experiences a loss of some quality relative to his or her present standing. For example, a victim of rape may lose her state of being chaste. That when she meets a guy whom she adored much, the guy's parents may hinder their relationship because of what happened to her. Conservatism and liberalism theory. Conservative ideologists assume that the ideal society is one in which authority is unquestioned. The hierarchy of wisdom and virtue is accepted by all as based on recognizing natural inequalities. Because human nature is basically egoistic. People need discipline, instruction for those with the requisite capacity, restraint for those lacking the capacity to understand. Unfortunately, society is threatened by defective people, individuals and population groups who cannot or will not accept the authority and direction of their superiors, and resort to crime to profit from the labors of others. Criminals and predators and their crimes are the results of pathologies of mind and body. Fear of crime is promoted by focusing attention on heinous crimes and emphasizing the failures of rehabilitation, probation, and the parole. The public is encouraged to believe that they are threatened by a surrounding army of murderous psychopaths epitomized in racial and class stereotypes. Liberalism assumes that the ideal society is one which there is equality of opportunity and general consensus to accept differences and rewards as the outcomes of fair competition. Social stratification is functional if based on merit, that is, differences in achievement. It is dysfunctional insofar as it based on an ascription. Example, inherited status or other attributes independent of a performance or mere power differences. Contemporary society is basically sound, grounded in the principles of representative democracy and enlightened capitalism. So if we are going to analyze liberalism, it's completely the opposite of conservatism, in which liberalism can be compared to a democratic form of government in which everybody's opinion is respected and that what matters most is fairness and equality among the populace, while in conservatism can be related to a communist form of government in which the power of the government is absolute and it controls the behavior and actions of its populace. Radicalism. Radicalism main notion is replace defective societies, whether left or right. A radical ideology envisions the ideal society as one in which people naturally creative and freedom-loving are able to do as they please in going about their peaceful business, without interference by anyone, especially those claiming or representing some presumed higher authority. A common theme in righteous ideology is that racial and ethnic minorities are favored to keep more capable groups from becoming strong enough to challenge the system. To leftists, particularly those inspired by Marxism, class, racial, and other forms of discrimination are promoted by the ruling classes to keep the workforce divided, thus more easily controlled. Rightist radicalism emphasizes moral deterioration, reflected in crime rates as the forerunner of society, political and economic collapse into war among racial and other groups fighting to survive. Leftist radicalism possesses fundamental and ultimately fatal contradictions in the structuring of capitalist liberal democracy. For example, the inherent clash between capitalist interests in maximizing profits and workers' interests in maximizing wages, as well as the contradiction between capitalist interests in minimizing labor costs and their interests in maximizing consumer purchases. Identify fusion theory. So this theory is defined as a visceral feeling of oneness with a group that is associated with increased permeability of the boundary between the personal and social self. It was created by William B. Swan Jr. and Michael D. Burnmercer in 2012. The blending of an individual's personal self and social self with that of a group has attempted to explain why a person engages in political participation. Personal self remains salient. Focused persons feel that they both strengthen and draw strength from the group, resulting in elevated personal agency. Few persons view the group as family and believe that family members require sacrifices. When a family member is imperial, they experience emotions akin to when self is imperial. Result, strongly fused people will make extreme sacrifices for the group. For example, if one of the members of the gang was killed and the other members knew who killed their co-member, then there is a big possibility that this gang will join forces to revenge against the killer, because each member of the gang feels that they are one family within the group. They have sense of oneness within the group. That's all, ma'am, and thank you.